From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Thursday in May, the very first day of May. We are here to discuss the awful, terrible, disastrous April that was for the Baltimore Orioles and try to spin it forward. Is there anything positive we can take from there, or do we just flush the month entirely? All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors. That's right, John.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Huge for the brand. John, I tweeted out the other day at All Banner Sports. Sorry, we have different accounts on different at All Banner Sports on X.
Okay.
This was when the Orioles were losing the Kyle Gibson game, second game of this 3-game series to the New York Yankees and getting absolutely walloped. I tweeted out, give me one word to describe the Orioles season so far. Got a lot of words that I can't repeat on the air here, but some of my favorites, punchless, shambolic, and soup sandwich, which is 2 words, and I don't really know how that fits, but I liked it. What would be your one word?
Well, my one word to you is why. At that moment specifically,
why
would you solicit feedback from people who were watching that game? And I understand why, but
engagement farming.
Yeah. No, I think it's worth. It's just disappointing. Like, this is just really disappointing that this has happened this way. It's impactful because this is not something you can erase. As I ended up arriving at that night, writing wise, like, if we're supposed to be like, every other night this team's going down by like a ton of runs, and Brandon Hyde's like, well, it's really hard to hit and really hard to come back when you go down early. Like, that's what their season is at this point. Like, they're down early. They have to play like really good baseball and win a lot of games for the rest of the season to get where they want to be, and that's going to be challenging. So it's disappointing. I don't think there is maybe this podcast is a space for nuance. I don't think there's a lot of reason to have nuance. I don't think there's a lot of value in being like, well, this happened and like they didn't think so. But like, I don't think you could have. I think if you wanted to sit here and say like they could not have seen any of this coming, and like this is like worst case scenario, all like times 50 different circumstances, you could. And if you want to say like, everyone involved in putting this team together is a total idiot. How did you not see this coming? Like, no one's going to, like, everybody has eyes. Like, you're not gonna be able to tell that person they're wrong, even though there's ways that like they might be. It's just disappointing. It
is very disappointing. Either they are getting blown out like they did in the second game of that series, or they are winning very close games like they did in games 1 and 3. They took the series from the Yankees. They won 2 out of 3. Amazingly, despite the fact that they were outscored by 10 overall. And that was one of those series that felt like a series loss, despite the fact that they won it. They've won 2 games in a row. They've won consecutive games just once all season. And the losses feel like 2 losses in a row. They feel like consecutive losses because of the way that you lose those games. I mean, the way that they lost the second game of that series made it feel like the Orioles at the very least split that series because it was so depressing.
Yeah. And like, you also have to look at it like this team barely, like, they haven't had a lot of off days. And I'm just looking at it as they're doing this. Like, they won 1 time before an off day. So like they've gone 2 days without losing. That means now 3 times, including today. Like, if you can't even feel good for 1 full day before people felt really good about that win on Monday.
Yeah.
And like that, when you are in this position, everything is like, oh, well, this is a good sign. There's no good signs when you're winning like 4 in a row because everything is good.
Yes.
When you win 1 game after like a brutal road trip, that can mean something until literally 2 pitches into the next game.
Yes.
And it stops meaning anything. And today they won, and now there's nothing bad that can happen today, I don't think. There were times with this team in the not too distant past where like off days were occasions for people that own the team to do something that made it so there were bad things could happen on off days. I don't think bad things could happen today, but there's not any platform for the bad stuff to stop happening because they can't consistently pitch on a nightly basis.
You can't hurt us today, I think is what a lot of Orioles fans are thinking. I mean,
don't threaten me with a good time, says John Angelos.
Yeah, really. There are we talked about in the last podcast that there were signature moments from last season in the second half where you thought, okay, this looks like the team from this first half of the season, team from 2023. And you've seen fewer of those, but you've seen a couple little moments. And certainly Felix Bautista closing out that game last night felt like a moment. It's not about moments anymore. It's about winning consistently. We're not looking for moral victories. We're not looking for sparks. We are looking for them to be a good baseball team and to prove it. And a 9-16 April in which they put up a 360 win percentage, which was the worst month they've ever had in a full month since April 2022, when they went 7-14 before Adley Rutschman joined the team. And that was a shortened month because of the lockout drama, so there were fewer games there. That kind of month is not going to really inspire much confidence. Had they lost last night, John, that would have been the lowest percentage in a full month by the team, 320, since August 2021, that month where they lost, or they won just 4 games.
Right.
So we're talking a ways away. This was the worst month the Orioles have had in the Adley Rutschman era. And they got outscored by 58 in that month. They put up a 5.64 ERA. They averaged just 3.5 runs per game in those 25 April games. So far, they've suffered 8 blowout losses, which a blowout loss is defined as 5 or more runs. They suffered just 20 of those in all of last season. So as bad as things got in the second half of the 2024 season, they were not as bad as how we've seen them so far this season. And yet, it was just a month. It was just April. It was just the first 30 games of the season. It's the worst 30-game start they've had since 2019. Certainly not an ideal start. However, it is just a month. To put all of that aside, they have 5 months left of the baseball season to rectify this.
Yeah, and it's challenging because, like I said, if you are going to accept that it's hard to come back in a single game, and that is like gospel, and it's true.
When you're down by 28.
Yeah, and like also like a lot of those runs don't ultimately like they're embarrassing, but they're not like, and you're creating these games. Like there's been two different types. I think they've had a couple of biggish wins. But there's been 2 types of Orioles games. There's games that they've had a chance in, and they're pretty competitive in those games. And there's games where they haven't had a chance in, and they lose those games. We're talking about the pitching staff and the issues that are, and that have presented themselves in the rotation. And I just pulled it up. And if you take out Charlie Morton and Kyle Gibson from the rotation, it has a 4.80 ERA. A 4.80 ERA is
not
pitching
great
into the 5th inning and giving up 3 runs, which is what Cade Povich did yesterday.
Yeah, which was enough.
That wins you games. And I think this is a question of ambition and like intent, but and I've had to think about my own thoughts on this, but I've never thought that the Orioles rotation had to be anything other than fine, but like if you're aiming for fine, like the downside is bad.
Yes.
If you're aiming for great and the downside is fine, like you're fine.
Right.
If you're aiming for fine and the downside is bad, you're in a bit of trouble. So I think that I think they need to stop falling behind so much so early, as we were talking about it all. As we were talking about before we started, in the column I wrote Tuesday, by that point, 19% of their at bats had happened when they're down by 4 runs or more. That's a lot. That's 1 out of 5 at bats basically, and they were terrible in those. Truly, and it bears it out. It bears it out. They had like a 4-something OPS, or maybe a 6. 4-something OPS in those at bats. So basically, when they're losing, I'm not saying effort wise roll over, but like results wise, they are matching the circumstances. They're matching the game state by being very, very bad. And you take out those from their overall offensive production, and their team OPS goes up like 45 points. This is a team that, if they are in touch in the games, can find a way. And they need to stop. There's a lot of things that can make it so they stop falling behind by so much and stop losing as often and as embarrassingly as they have in a lot of these cases. Right. But it feels like that's like a lot to ask.
Yeah. No, I mean, we from the outside, our perspective is that we've watched these guys, Gunnar, Adley, Mountcastle, Westberg. We've watched all these guys be good for significant stretches early in their career. And so to see them struggle so mightily I mean, all of those guys currently have an OPS below 700. Adley Rutschman, Ryan Mountcastle, Jackson Holiday, Gunnar Henderson, Heston Kjerstad, Tyler O'Neill, who's now on the IL, Jordan Westberg, who's now on the IL, Ramon Laureano, Gary Sanchez, who's now on the IL, Jorge Mateo, save maybe that last name. We have seen these guys be good for a long stretches of time. And so our job from the outside is to look at this and say, why is this happening? That all of these guys are struggling. And at a certain point, it defies reasoning. It defies explanation. And so our job, we're trying to find explanations for it. But I think that the one that you have stumbled upon and written about on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
You killed that.
Thank you. And get John's newsletter as well, Inside the Dugout, is that when you are down by so much, so early, like they were in the second game of the series where Kyle Gibson comes in and home run in the first inning. I mean, I was not at that game. I sat down to dinner and the Orioles were already losing 5-0 in the first inning. Turns out Kyle Gibson, who, as Danielle Allentuck put in our Slack, no other team wanted to sign and was signed a week before the season. Turns out he was not, and his 37 was not going to be the stopper for this team. Shocker. But when you're down by that much, that early in games, how can you possibly stay in it mentally? And the one guy who has been able to consistently do it is the one guy who was here through the worst parts of the rebuild, Cedric Mullins. The one guy who's been able to compartmentalize, not care about watching the ball fly over his head in center field for home runs. Every at bat, he goes up there like it's a 0-0 game. And the guys who are struggling the most are the guys like Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman, who have been with this team through mostly winning times. And at a certain point, you do have to compartmentalize and put that aside and come out and win. But at the same time, nothing the Orioles offense could have done in that game, in the second game of that series, could have won them the game. They were so far out of it. So why waste an offensive effort? I mean, the Orioles pulled Adley Rutschman for Maverick Hanley in the 5th inning of that game. So when the manager is signaling that the game is over, the 24-2 loss that they had two, not one, but two position players pitching in that game. When everybody is signaling and you can look at the scoreboard and say that the game is over, how can you possibly stay in it? How can you stay driven? That's your job as a baseball player. It's your job as a professional athlete, but it is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And those things, that's one of the things that have complicated this for me. I think early on, I dealt with it a little worse than I am now. Like now this is a team that's like pretty meaningfully below 500 a month into the season. Like that's not nothing, but the losses felt worse than just one loss in the score column. You know, these games, there's really no difference other than like blowing up people's ERAs and like bringing down their OPSs when you lose by that much, but it's still one loss and they feel terrible. Like it's really impactful. And I think, you know, and this is workshopping idea corner. I've been trying to workshop this idea. I don't think I've done a good job of it, and I'm not going to talk for 15 minutes straight this time.
That was fun last time.
That was a great time. I had a blast doing that. But like we were referencing earlier conversations, and like with the Sixers, it was like trust the process. Like the Orioles also have accumulated a lot of like process oriented people. Like that's their deal. Like if we do this, we know X outcome is going to happen because that's how this works. And like that doesn't help you when you are losing games to get out of that cycle. Like you teach and instruct the same things and they keep you, because you think they're going to happen, you just keep doing the thing that you think is going to lead to that thing happening. And meanwhile, like your starting pitcher goes out and gives up 7 runs, and like it doesn't really matter if you're taking good at bats. It doesn't really matter if you're hitting the ball hard if the outcomes don't really match it. So, you know, I'm looking at you. We're talking about Cedric Mullins, a player who has been through a lot of the bad times. I think Ramon Urias gets a lot of.
He deserves a shout out.
He deserves a shout out too. He also was brutal last April.
Yes.
He had a WRC plus of 25 and an OPS of 452, which is, both of those are bad. Both of those are very bad.
Yes.
And he ended up being a really, really productive hitter, especially in the second half.
He hit 5 home runs, I think, in August. He went on a
tear. Yeah, he was like their best hitter in August. And it was really, I mean, a lot of things happened that made this team not be able to hit in the second half of the season, but losing him when they did was one of them.
Yeah.
Cedric Mullins had a terrible May. Basically from like last week until like the beginning of June last season, he was brutal.
Yeah.
Like only Tim Anderson was worse than him at the plate in all of baseball. And he ended up having an above average offensive season overall. there is a reason why this team was put together the way that it was. I think more so on the lineup side than on the pitching side, but like it is because there is a body of evidence that these players are better than this. And when that is the case, like, and it goes this badly, there's not a lot you can do other than hope that's right. And that, I'm not saying that that's what I'm doing. I'm not sitting here like crossing my fingers every night being like, I hope Heston Kjerstad does have a 790 OPS soon, like, because that's what you expect. I think for this team, like, there's not a lot of levers they could pull. Like, you just have to bank on what got you to this point and say, like, that was brutal, and like it's not going to be brutal forever. It can't be. It can be, but like you have to tell yourself it can't.
Yeah, I mean this lineup is set. This is mostly the guys that they came into the season with the exception of Colton Cowser. This is the lineup that they were expecting to have. These are the guys that they waited years for.
Yeah, and Jordan Westberg, has clearly been impacted by something for most of the season. It seems like Brandon Hyde's telling has been impacted physically for most of the season, other than like that first weekend when he kind of went berserk. Like, yeah, there have been spells where he's gotten right, like a day off and gotten right, but like that's a meaningful player to not have at his best as well. Tyler O'Neill doesn't seem like, I don't know that you could have counted on him to be right physically for the whole year, but he's like, and that, I saw some stuff on Tuesday as this team's getting just like their brains bashed in, that like the lineup was like an indictment on the front office. And it's like, do you think the front office was sitting there like drawing out their April 29th lineup with like 7, 8, 9 of like, I think it was Mateo Carlson, right. Rivera, like, no, that's not what you thought was going to happen. Yeah. They did what they could with what they needed, but like they tried to plug the holes that they had. And I don't think, Ramon Laureano seems like a fine player. He didn't get hits against lefties the first 2 weeks of the season. I don't think he's still hitting lefties right now. Like, I'm just jumping all over your outline, but like he seems fine. He's here for a job. If Colton Cowser was healthy, he wouldn't be playing that much. Like, there's just a lot of things have happened that are not really in like the normal realm of outcomes together.
The Orioles went into the offseason front office saying we need to hit lefties better, which they did. Last year they struggled a lot against lefties, but it wasn't as drastic as I think some people think. In 2024 they had a slugging percentage as a team that was 6th in baseball against lefties. In 2023 it was 10th, so they even improved last year, but they made a clear effort to go out and acquire guys that they knew could hit lefties. So they get Tyler O'Neill, who has been a lefty masher his entire career. They get Gary Sanchez. They get Ramon Laureano, and they thought they fixed it. And through the first month plus of the season, as a team, they're hitting 172 against lefties with a 492 OPS. That is dreadful. And so the guys that you brought in to hit lefties haven't been. Tyler O'Neill is hitting under 100 against left-handers this year. He's now in the IL. Gary Sanchez, another guy who's on the IL, 0 for 16 against lefties. Ramon Laureano, 130 prior to yesterday, hitting 130 against left-handers this season. Those are 3 guys you counted on to be able to be in the lineup and produce against lefties, and they just haven't. So I don't know what is going on with those 3 guys, but the Orioles banked a lot in those, put a lot of stock in those guys, and they have not lived up to their career trajectory.
Yeah, and they also did that because that was what they had available for them to do. I was going back and looking at some of the things Michael Elias said the end of last season as they got we're trying to like unpack the playoffs. And he said, he said, we're going to evaluate a lot of things. We're going to do a lot of things differently, but we really believe in this group. And like could you have, I know my stupid idea was like, just go sign Alex Bregman. Like, who cares? Like, just go get like a dude to be that like right-handed presence. And like, they clearly didn't. They obviously didn't do that, but that's because if you are a dude like that, who's like, can really like make an impact, like you're not going to sign to play a part-time role. Yeah. There's a huge amount of players who are eliminated from your consideration if you're like, we got this kid we took 2nd overall a few years ago, and we've told him to wait for like 2 years, and now is his time, but you can play with him.
Right.
Like, are you going to be like, okay, yeah, I'd love that opportunity to be the small part of a platoon with a bunch of with 2 corner outfielders that they took in the first round, and I'm going to get a ton of chances.
Right.
I know I'm going to get a ton of chances. Like, no, you're going to say,
where can I start?
Yeah. Can someone else have 450 at bats for me? Like, that would be great. I would like that better.
I mean, look at what Alex Bregman did in Boston. They immediately put him at third base, and he shoved out the guy that the Red Sox had just committed a long-term extension to in Rafael Devers. Like, he went to a place where he was assured that he was going to start, and at a position where they already had a bona fide starter.
Yeah. Yes. That was part of the reason. Like, and he's like, we read the stories like him riding the bus to Sarasota and like wearing the gray pants with all the kids. It's like, sometimes that's the type of thing that like makes a difference. But also, he's a really good player.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of things really well. And I don't know why I'm still talking about Alex Bregman. It's my hill to die on. But you get this weird, like, thing where like these guys are signed for these like bit roles, and it's very magnified when they're not doing what they're supposed to do, because that's what they're here for.
Right. And I want to get your thoughts real quick on a discussion that I had with Danielle Allentuck on our previous episode a couple days ago about whether the Orioles suffer from a lack of leadership. Because to me, Alex Bregman would have filled that role to a large extent. Multiple time World Series winner. I just don't know if they got that guy in the lineup. I think they tried to get that guy in the rotation. I think Charlie Morton was supposed to be that guy for the rotation. I think Andrew Kittredge was supposed to be that guy for the bullpen. And those so far haven't worked out because of Morton's poor performance and Kittredge's injury. I don't think that there was anybody that they signed this offseason that was akin to an Aaron Hicks in 2023 or akin to a James McCann for the last couple years. A guy who was a bona fide clubhouse leader who had won World Series and been to the mountaintop. And maybe he's not going to produce as much as some of the younger guys on the team, but he is going to teach these guys, help bring them along and help keep their heartbeats low and their pulses steady. Are they missing that right now in the lineup, or does that just have to come from the guys that they have right now?
I don't know. I was thrilled that you guys had that conversation without me. I just have like, it's like, I don't know if it's a blind spot for me or if it's just like, I'm just like obstinate about it, but like, I just cannot. Like, what would that person do? Would they like, all right, everybody, let's start getting hits with guys on second, ready, break, like go team. Like, what is that? Like, where does that come from? Like, yeah, would it be, I guess, would it be nice to have somebody like, do you want them to like start bullying people? Be like, sorry, you're too nice. Like, let's start getting a little edge to you. Like, I don't understand what the value, and this is partially from like my conversations over the years where like there have been spring trainings and like we're talking about a young team and like, if you can believe it, like a lot of experience with the Orioles where like they got rid of all their experienced players and they just had a lot. And like you show up to Sarasota and everyone's swamp on everybody, be like, who are the leaders? And like, then everyone would walk away and the players would be like, what are they talking about? Like, Who cares? Like, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter who the leaders are. So I'm a little informed by that, but I don't know what, I know what everyone is saying and that's why I'm trying to, if I'm not going to like fully like buy in or like be open to that idea, I'm trying to think of the ideas of what I am open to. And that's been a longer process than, but I just don't, it's like, what, like, did Aaron Hicks like tell people like to get hits with runners in scoring position? Is that why they were like incredible, like record setting offense with runners in scoring position in 2023? And then he left and nobody was there to tell him to do that. Like, I don't think so. I don't know what Aaron Hicks told them, but like,
it's hard to quantify the value of that player. Yeah. It's I would say impossible to quantify the value of that player. I mean, I think that's something that, in that book Astro Ball about that 2017 Astros team, that was something that they identified that they were missing and go out there. I don't know if you can find specific moments and say that that's a moment that wouldn't have happened if Aaron Hicks wasn't here. That's a moment that wouldn't have happened if James McCann wasn't here. It's a vibe thing and it's a feel thing. And that's why I think when we even discuss it, we open ourselves up to criticism of, we'll point to instances where that has helped. But it's hard to watch this team every day and to watch them flounder and then to watch them wear it.
Yeah.
And think that they currently have the correct mix of veterans and young guys.
Yeah. And I think that is,
we're grasping at straws here, but we're trying to pinpoint something that is impossible to quantify.
Yeah. And like, and I find myself asking like, and the answer to the question is like not what they did. But I'm like, what are you supposed to do? You have nailed on guys that you like, that you brought through for a reason, that you have here for a reason, and that you feel good about at every single position on the diamond sitting here in October of 2024. You know that you're finally able to give Heston Kjerstad his chance. You know that Colton Cowser is like a nailed on corner outfielder. You have Cedric Mullins in the outfield. You have Adley Rutschman as your catcher. You have a good first base platoon and Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn. You have Westberg, Henderson, Holiday on the dirt around them. Like those people who make those differences on those teams, like I think back to some of the years the Red Sox won a couple of World Series when I was growing up and following them based on signing like guys to short-term deals. But they signed really good players to be everyday players. And like they were veterans and they were presences, but they were also really good players who played every single day. There is not like, when I say what are they supposed to do, like obviously you just like say like trade 3 of these guys for a better starting pitcher than you ended up having, and then you have a space for one of these guys. But they are just so convicted in like these guys being good and this working out the way that they thought it would, that they didn't have like the opportunity or the reason to do that. So you're ending up shopping in like a different section of the store than what this conversation is saying they need. And that is, it very well could be like the thing that undermines this team. It very well could be something that it turns out, okay, we could be having this conversation in June and then, you know, maybe the leaders are in there. Maybe it doesn't matter if you have a leader, if everybody's hitting. Like this conversation only started when things started going badly. And they had veterans on the teams that were doing better, but this conversation has started when they stopped hitting. And like, I'm just like, what are they supposed to, like, somebody can be like, hey, Adley, like, want to start getting hits again with runners in scoring position? Like, that's probably not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we are reactionary by nature. You know, we came into this season with our preconceived notion.
Not me.
We came into this season with these ideas of how good this team would be and how they would perform. We both predicted them as a playoff team. I said they would win 95 games. I think you said 92 games. And when the win-loss record doesn't meet our expectations, we look for reasons why that has occurred. And so that's one of the biggest things that I think that we are trying to suss out from the outside without really knowing. You know, we're just kind of throwing ideas out there. But it certainly is something that we only started talking about when they started losing, because we're trying to say, why are all these guys who we just saw be very good all of a sudden not be as good? All right. Well, I want to talk about the pitching before we get out of here, because I was thinking about this rotation as a whole, and I was thinking about the conversations that we had coming into the season about, well, the Orioles have 2 guys at the top of their rotation who could be defined as number 2s or number 1s on lesser teams. Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Eflin. Those guys are solid number 2s. They're not capital A aces, but they're solid number 2s. And then they have a group of guys who you could reasonably consider as 5s in a rotation, maybe 4s, but closer to 5s. And the sheer volume of those guys convinced us that the Orioles had better quality when in fact they were perhaps overwhelming us with quantity. And I thought back to the movie The Big Short. John, you know far, 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 far more about economics than I do. I know next to nothing about economics.
Okay.
However, I have seen The Big Short, and that informs all of what I know on the 2008 housing crisis that gripped the United States and the world as well. Went to Wikipedia, best source for all of this information, and this lines up with what I remember. There was a big housing bubble that was growing larger and larger as we got into 2008, and it was financed by mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations, which initially offered higher interest rates than government securities, along with attractive risk ratings from rating agencies. Follow me here. I know this is brutal that I'm discussing this right now.
Okay.
And I know you're wondering how I'm going to tie this into baseball. Despite being highly rated, most of these financial instruments were made up of high-risk subprime mortgages. Okay. So what I understood from that movie and what I understood from everything that I've read about, which is not a whole lot, about 2008, is you took these subprime mortgages and they lumped them into these securities and sold them on Wall Street. And they weren't great mortgages. They were pretty high risk. But because there were a lot of them, and because the rating agencies weren't maybe as ethical as they should have been, they were able to convince these rating agencies to give them higher ratings, and then their value went up. So they went from maybe a C plus to a B because there were a lot of them. And so they kind of tricked the system in order to do that. And then the housing bubble burst when all of these mortgages were not able to be fulfilled. There were delinquent payments, and then the stock market crashed because of that. Please correct me if I'm wrong about this. If you are listening to this and you know way more about economics, I'd appreciate your opinion.
That sounds right, though.
Here's how that relates. Thank you. Here's how that relates to the Orioles. Think of Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano, Kyle Gibson, Dean Kramer, Cade Povich, Albert Suarez as one big group that carries a lot of risk. Each individual guy in there carries risk. But we looked at this from the outside, and we were overwhelmed by the sheer amount of guys that they had in there. And we thought, this rotation is going to be better than it is because maybe not all these guys will hit, but there are a lot of guys in there. And then things started to fall apart. Albert Suarez hits the injured list. Charlie Morton blows up, unfortunately. Kyle Gibson blew up in his first start. Cade Povich struggled in his first couple starts. Dean Kramer had an awful April. And the stock market, the proverbial stock market, crashed on this team because we were overwhelmed by the number of guys here. And the Orioles made all of these one-year signings, all of these higher risk signings, these moves like a Tomoyuki Sugano, like a Charlie Morton. And with it kind of lulled us into a sense of security because as we were getting closer and closer to the season, we were saying, well, the Orioles didn't get their ace, but they got somebody who's been there, done it. And Charlie Morton is, maybe not going to be an ace, but he's going to be fine. And Tomoyuki Sugano is not going to be an ace, but he certainly has enough stuff to play. And he, by the way, has been very good. Kyle Gibson was here a few years ago, and he was just fine. Surely this team will be able to put together a rotation that lacks an ace, but they'll find enough guys there. That was a false sense of confidence. And when some of those guys started to fall and some of those high-risk bets failed, the house of cards fell. And to me, that's what happened here. And when the Orioles lost their two number twos in Grayson Rodriguez and Zach Eflin, the other 3, 4, 5, 6 guys that were supposed to be number 5s in the rotation, guess what? For a number 5 in the rotation, every now and again, that guy's going to bust and he's going to leave your rotation.
Yeah.
Number 5, you don't see guys that are consistently a number 5 in a rotation. Number 5 spot in a rotation is usually a spot that is a rotating cast of characters for a franchise.
Correct.
So these number 5s, what has been unfortunate is almost all of them have turned into busts. The only ones that have really worked so far, Cade Povich is showing definitely some signs of improvement, and so is Tomoyuki Sugano. But other than those guys, we have seen these number 5s turn out to be closer to 6s and 7s. And that's, to me, what this team is struggling with. The bubble has burst, John. Did that make sense?
It does. It does. I think I get it. You've been talking about this.
I've made my point.
You've been talking about this for a bit. I was very excited to listen to it and hear it. Yes, that is what has happened right now.
Thank you.
I was going back as you were talking, as I was doing multiple things, listening and searching.
When you were not listening and just
I was listening.
Computer.
No, I was listening. Charlie Morton ZiPS projections, Fangraphs ZiPS projections this year, 4.29 ERA. He's gonna have to basically have a lot of zeros. It hasn't happened in April. He's gonna have a lot of zeros over like 7 innings to get it down to that point. It's probably not gonna happen. Dean Kramer was projected at 3.95. Cade Povich 4.25. These are, when you are giving people who can't afford houses mortgages, there's a lot of things that suggest that they shouldn't have mortgages. The only thing that suggests right now that the Orioles should not have put together the rotation the way that they did is because it's been terrible.
Yeah. But that's our job. Our job is to look at the failures.
I understand that. I understand that. So, and I think that's kind of the thing right now is that these are all spokes off the same wheel that we're talking about. Like, why don't they have more veteran experience in the lineup? Because they drafted these players because they believe in XYZ, and that's how they identify and draft players. Like, everything comes out of one computer. Everything comes out of one system. Like they put this stuff together, and I'm not saying these are exactly the same as theirs, but like they put it together because there's years and years of background to say that if X, Y, and Z has happened in the player's career, you can pretty reasonably expect over the course of a season that this is going to happen this year. None of that has happened this year. I think that they were probably limited in how they were able to bolster the depth based on like the fact that the depth was mostly injured already. It's obscene how hurt this starting rotation is. And I don't think that Charlie Morton would be pitching better if he didn't have, like, if he wasn't like the number 2 starter. I don't think that's how that would go. I don't think Cade Povich would be pitching better if he wasn't asked to pitch in the role that he is. I think that what is happening right now is that the bad is so bad that like, and we talked about Margin Call as well. Like,
great movie.
Yeah.
Underrated movie.
When you go outside of like the standard, like here's how things can swing. Like that's what's happened. When you give up 4 home runs in the first, like whatever many pitches, like not a lot of pitches on 4 different pitches, like you have exceeded the risk limits. Like you are outside of the world that you thought was going to be possible. And like, that's when bad stuff happens. Like that's what's happened here. So like in that sense, yes, like everything they thought was going to happen pretty much played out, like blew up in their face in April in a lot of ways. Because, and I think back, we talked about like hitting with runners in scoring position. Like when Michael Elias talked about that, and we're talking about like a day after they got swept out of the playoffs, he said like, that's not really something that you can control for in a year-to-year thing, but we're going to act as if we can control it. And like, that goes for everything. Like we are going to examine everything, and pretty much all of the things that if you wanted to be nice to the Baltimore Orioles and said, this is the stuff, these are the reasons why last year's second half went the way that it did. Pretty much all the things that happened have happened again. There's really important injuries in the lineup. There's a rotation that's not what you thought it was going to be.
I remember saying in their first podcast, listing out the reasons why the Orioles would be better than they were last year. And I said, those things, the injuries that happened in the rotation again, that happened in the rotation are not going to happen again. And if they are, the Orioles are just cursed. Maybe the Orioles are just cursed.
Yeah. There's not like all the things. And that's kind of what I've been trying to process. And like, if you can't tell, I'm doing a lot of processing right now with all this, because there's like responsibility. I feel like on my end to like figure out what I think and what I want to think. And I'm doing it into a microphone right now, and it's not very good content. But I'm also thinking about it a lot when we're not on microphone.
Neither was my rant about housing crisis.
I liked it, Paul. I liked it. I just think that this has gone really badly, and like, if you want to say that like that they should have known this was going to happen, like you are not wrong. You're not wrong. And like, that's something that is probably tough. And you know what? If things flip, a lot of people there's like, it's not going to be that they were wrong this month. It was just that they stopped being like it. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that what's frustrating to me is that the Orioles got depth in order to avoid the situation that they incurred in the second half of last year, but their depth has not been good. I mean, look at the Yankees as the prime example of the opposite.
Yeah.
The Yankees lost Garrett Cole for the entire season. He is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He is better than Zach Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez probably combined, just because of how good that guy is. But guess what? They signed Max Fried a couple off seasons ago. They signed Carlos Rodon. They have the depth that is good depth. They signed multiple guys there that are, maybe Rodon hasn't lived up to his contract. We'll see how Max Fried's contract plays out over the course of time. They got so many guys there that they are able to better withstand those kind of injuries. And so when the Orioles lost Grayson Rodriguez and Zach Eflin, here comes Kyle Gibson to the rescue. That's for a $5.25 million contract. It's not the same as here comes Max Fried to the rescue. So that to me is the frustrating part, is the depth has not been good. And yes, that you could blame injuries, but if you had put more eggs into one basket, into the Nick Pivetta basket, so to speak, or the Nathan Eovaldi basket. I don't know if he ever would have left Texas, but to put a name on a guy that if you had just spent more money on, instead of all these little contracts, if you had just pooled that money together, spent it on one guy that is better than all of those guys combined, then maybe you would be in a better spot. Or maybe that guy comes to Baltimore and he gets hurt and you're in the exact same spot anyway, because he's only one guy and it's easier for one guy to get hurt than three guys to get hurt.
Yeah. I've thought about that a lot. And like, that's not, nobody's going to be like, that is a good point, and nobody's going to say a good point. So I'll say a good point to that. It's just like, and what if we're sitting here, and I'm not saying this, but I'm going to tell you what I did. And is I looked up like what Corbin Burns did in April last year and what Tomoyuki Sugano did. And like, there's a difference. But
big difference.
But in the result, in expected stats, and really the difference was Corbin Burns had a 2.5 ERA in April last year, and Tomoyuki Sugano's just 3. I'm not saying Tomoyuki Sugano is going to be Corbin Burns, but you can say based on the adjustments he's made and how he's performed that he's figuring it out. I was laughing as he was pitching well in his most recent start, but I was like, what if these people get a stupid draft pick for Tomoyuki Sugano winning Rookie of the Year? What if?
I made a video about that at the start of the year.
You did. And that's what made me think of it.
I'm patting myself in the back too much on this. Sorry,
but we're talking about the upside, and when we talk about Kyle Gibson's upside, what you can reasonably expect if Charlie Morton starts any more games, what you can reasonably expect from Cade Povich on a night like yesterday. The upside until a Zach Eflin comes back. The upside until a Grayson Rodriguez comes back, which I guess is something we're still talking about happening. Is that they just pitch fine, and that's not something to aspire to. It's not something you can count on. That's not something you can count on.
That's a good way
and
to put
if you are buying this, if you are putting this all together into, knowing what we know now, which is, I think, kind of to tie it back. If you're bundling this all together and being like, buy this, is going to work, I think you need to know that what you're buying is you're going to be fine. The best case scenario is you're going to be fine. You might not lose money. You might make a little money. You're not going to get rich off of it. And you might lose it all too. And we're in the moment where it feels like they kind of lost it all.
Yeah.
And that might not be the case in a couple of weeks. If Kyle Gibson can just be fine, that will be better than what he did in this first start. And that would be better than Charlie Morton. If Zach Eflin can be better than fine, which he is, that would be good. If Dean Kramer can not be April Dean Kramer, if he could just be the rest of the year Dean Kramer, that would be great. But there's just not a lot. You don't feel good sitting here being all they got to do is not give up 5 runs in the first 3 innings of every game, and this team will be in good shape, because that's feels like a demanding ask at this point.
Yes, exactly. Well, we'll see. Kyle Gibson is going to get at least one more start for this team against the Kansas City Royals. The next 3 starters, as they face the team that eliminated them from the playoffs last year: Dean Kramer, Tomoyuki Sugano, Kyle Gibson. Then they head on the road. We have a lot of time left in the season, but the Orioles should need to get things back on track sooner rather than later. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please rate, review, subscribe. Give us a 5-star review, and I will read it out here on the show. Justin on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. We go live on YouTube and on X every week, and he said Paul Mancano is Margot Robbie explaining from The Big Short with a glass of champagne and a bubble bath.
Okay, I like that. Could we clip that in? It's probably a copyright issue at this point, right?
Probably.
We can't do that, yeah.
First and last time I've ever gotten compared to Margot Robbie. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll be back at some point next week with another podcast. Hopefully we have more answers than we do questions for this team, but we'll see.
Yeah, don't look at me for that.